Howdy folks, and welcome to the Hunting Stories Podcast. I'm your host Michael, and today we're going to hear some stories from Ben Dziwulski. Ben actually owns his own company called WODPREP. If you're into fitness, you need to be following what Ben is doing on Instagram and his website. He's helping me personally push even harder in the elk woods, so I want to say thank you to him for that. But Ben is actually a brand new hunter, like less than a year. Ben is also the type of person that when he does anything, he does it 100% and he becomes an expert. He's an expert fitness guide, specifically for CrossFit. He's an expert fisherman. I know that he's competed in many professional tournaments, and I have no doubt that in the immediate future, he will be an expert hunter. Now that being said, just because he's a new hunter, it has not stopped him from having some great stories. So let's just jump right into it. I want to thank Ben, of course, for coming on, and now let's let him tell you his stories. All right, Ben, how you doing, man? Thank you so much for joining us here on the Hunting Stories Podcast.
I am super excited to be here. When anyone gives me a chance to just ramble about stories, I couldn't think of a better podcast format for me. And then my dad, even though my dad's not a hunter, I feel like he could come and just fill a whole podcast, even though he's never hunted a day in his life.
Oh, yeah, the biggest problem we've had with these is people like telling their hunting stories too much, and I've had to cut some people off because it's gotten a little too late in the night, and we've had a couple too many drinks on a few of the podcasts.
Oh, I hear you. Well, luckily, I am only drinking black cold brew coffee right now, so I might just talk so fast it'll be wrapped up soon. And don't worry, I like to try to make sure my stories are interesting, so I will do my best to have it short and sweet. Like my middle school English teacher said, whenever you're writing or speaking, it should be like a bikini. Just enough to cover the important parts, but small enough to keep it interesting.
That is a good way of putting it, and it definitely something that'll stick in your mind. I've never heard that before, but
you're welcome.
I'm going to tell that to somebody else someday in the future. Cool, Ben. Well, why don't you introduce yourself to the listeners so they can know who's telling us some stories today?
Yeah, so my name is Ben Dziwulski. I am 32 years old. I live in Denver, Colorado, and I have been hunting for less than 1 year. In fact, I think it's like probably about 9 months. And as maybe you'll find out at the end of this episode or during this episode, I've filled a lot of those 9 months with hunting. I have gone full send into it. My profession is I am a fitness business owner. So I own a company called WODPREP. It's a company that helps CrossFitters get better at CrossFit. So if anyone is, especially any hunters listening to this podcast, if you are someone who has maybe been doing CrossFit to stay in shape for the woods and stay in shape for the season, which obviously is a fantastic protocol. But if you actually want to get better at the sport of it and you want to learn how to do all the skills and techniques with the barbells and do it properly and do it better, then I'm your guy, or my team is your people. And you can just go to WODPREP, WODPREP.com, and we can help you get better at CrossFit. But yeah, that's my story.
Yeah, and I'll vouch for you. I know I've been following you on Instagram since we met back in April, and I think I told you before the podcast. Every time I'm at the CrossFit gym and I think, man, how do I get better at this? It seems like within a week you're putting out a little free video or a bit of content to show me exactly what I was thinking. So you've got a sixth sense with these things, and it's definitely helping me progress. I still have a long way to go, but yeah. It's exactly what I think a new CrossFit person should follow, so they can catch up with all of the the monsters that are in every gym.
Yeah, and it turns out all CrossFitters tend to have the same problems, and they all happen to be fixed the same way, and we are really good at it, so we can help you. And yeah, like we're a content production company. That's what we do. Is I make content, or the team makes content. We release it, so we're always producing new videos and releasing new stuff.
Yeah, perfect, man. Well, let's start with this. You've only been hunting for 9 months. I've got you beat by a couple years, but I'm relatively new as well. I've been hunting for about 6 years. What got you into it? I mean, this is probably more fresh in your memory than anyone else. Why did you pick up your bow?
Yeah, so I was actually reflecting about this the other day, that it's really, really good in life to have people that you trust so much that even if you're not particularly interested in doing something, if they're like, bro, you gotta try it. Just them saying it with that much conviction convinces you to try it. Those are good people to have in your life. So for me, it was my good friend, one of my best friends, Gary. And Gary has been living in Colorado for a few years longer than me. And when he found out that I was coming to Colorado, the first words out of his mouth is, "Dude, you got to come elk hunting with me." And I just roll my eyes. It's Gary. He talks a lot. He talks more than me.
Yeah.
Which is surprising. So
larger bikini.
Yeah, he's wearing a whole freaking onesie, man. So Gary's like, you gotta try elk hunting. I'm like, all right, Gary, because Gary's always trying to get me to try stuff. But he was pretty relentless about this one. And in my mind, hunting, I'm a big fisherman. Like I used to be a professional fisherman.
Wow.
I was a fishing guide. I was a shark fishing guide. I was a bass fishing guide. I used to fish a couple like semi-professional bass fishing tours. Like that was my thing. I was surrounded by hunters all the time, but for me, my like love of animals and my like empathy to like cute, snuggly creatures made me just kind of be like, I don't know if hunting's for me. Yeah. And I just never had someone really close to me that was a hunter. So I always viewed it kind of with like a bit of a distance where it's like, yeah, like, I don't know. It doesn't seem like it's for me. And my exposure to it was like, you know, I saw people with trophy hunting, and I had a really good friend that like showed me his dad's like trophy room, and there was like freaking elephants and shit. It was just like, to me, it was gross. Yeah. I was just like, I'm not into this. I don't want to go shoot these poor, adorable things, you know?
Yeah.
So
Bambi.
Yeah, exactly. So I just want to be clear with everyone. I'm sure a lot of people listening to this podcast are just like, who is this guy? You know, this freaking Tesla driving lefty. I do drive a Tesla, but my goal is to have a giant elk head strapped to the top of it in September, driving home on I-70 just to freak everyone out. That's my goal. But so anyway, so that's a bit of backstory here is like hunting to me was like, I can see it. I totally vibe with the idea of being like absolutely entrenched with the outdoors. But to me, I couldn't, the connection wasn't there. Right. But my friend Gary, we sat down and talked about it. And I was like, man, like, is it really like, why do you do it? Like, what's the purpose? And he's like, dude, hunting is the reason we have so much protected land in the United States. Hunting is the reason that elk populations and blah, 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 and he, you know, rattles off a million different things. It's the reason that all of these animals had made a resurgence. And I'm like, Gary, that makes no sense, right? Like why, like, aren't hunters the reason bison and elk went extinct, right? And he's like, yes. Yeah. However, that was back in the day when there were no rules and regulations surrounding hunting. There was no industry. There was no tags. There was no governing body. Now we do it right. And these biologists, you know, all agree that like, this is the way to manage these populations, blah, 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 blah. So we kind of planted that seed where I'm like, okay, I've never, like, that seems interesting. I'm not into the idea, but I'm intrigued. Over the course of probably a year of living in Colorado, because I missed the first season, he's like, dude, you got to come out with me. I'm like, I'm busy, whatever, man. And of course, like me and the rest of the buddies are always pestering him during elk season, during September. We were just like, Gary, did you kill one yet? And he's like, no. Like we're just bugging him and just twisting the knife because basically this was his second season. Second season goes by, he doesn't kill anything. But he comes out, and again, he's just like, dude, you have to try it. You just have to understand this. So I started doing more research on hunting, and I started looking into the ethics of hunting. And then I don't exactly remember when, but I just realized, I'm like, wait a minute. There's no way I'm going to be vegetarian, right? I mean, one, for strictly health reasons, like I realized the value of complete proteins. And also I realized that like, as we were hunter gatherers, like that's like very ancestral to us. Hunting is a part of what makes us human. So I started thinking
Absolutely.
about it from that perspective. Then I was like, you know what? I love barbecue and I love meat and I love all this stuff. Every single time I take that first bite of meat, I have consciously chosen to kill an animal, whether I knew it or not. I guess it was more subconsciously chosen to kill an animal. What makes that any different than going and hunting for that same animal? So the gear started turning and I started being like, you know what? If I choose to eat meat, then I should have absolutely no problem with ethical hunting, because if anything, that animal is living a much, much better life than any freaking cow or sheep or whatever the heck I'm eating. I don't know if I've ever eaten sheep. I don't know why that was an example. Or chicken or what. Like, those animals lived a pretty shitty life in a confined animal feeding operation. And it just like the dominoes started falling, man. They really did. They started falling in my mind. Talked to Gary more. I did my own research. I started like just contemplating the ethics of hunting. And then I realized, I'm like, you know what? Like, how amazing would it be to only live off of animals that like you've personally been the one to pull the trigger or release the arrow, or, you know, like there's a certain level of intimacy involved. And I can imagine that meat is going to mean so much more to me rather than just like walking down the street and getting a burger. I'm just killing some cow that I didn't know about. So those dominoes started falling. And then there's some point in the year where I'm just like, Gary, this was last year. There was some point in the year, or it might've been like late 2020, right?
Okay.
I don't know. Dates are not my thing. Anyway, late in the year or earlier in the year, I was
everything's a little fuzzy with COVID, right?
Yes, exactly. I was like, Gary, I'm in. Like, I'm going to try it. But I warn you that if I get into it, there's no stopping me. And Gary's like, I know, dude. I know. Because when I do things, man, I don't know if this counts as cussing, but I don't know if we're allowed to cuss on this podcast. I should have asked, but
go for it. No, totally fine.
When it comes to doing things, I am very much a whole ass person, not a half ass person. Like, if you're going to do something, do it all the way. And that's the way I've approached every single hobby I've ever done. It's the way I've approached anything. So if I like it, it's off to the races. And I warned Gary, I was like, Gary, I'm going to do it. I'm just going to follow your lead. You tell me what gear to get. I'll get it. I'll get my bow. I'll get all the things you want to do. I also really did like the idea that it was archery. Like that sort of intimacy just felt more ethical to me. And I'm not, at this point, I'm not saying it is or is not anymore. But like at the time I was like, oh, archery, like you're giving the animal a really fair chance. What I didn't realize is I didn't stand a chance. But
right.
So I just, all those things came and I made the decision. I was like, Gary, I'm in. Like, I'm ready. Like, I will do it. You just tell me what gear to get. If you can help me like walk through the timeline that I need to have to approach this, I'm good. I'm in it. And so some point in the summer leading up to September, I went to my bow shop. My local bow shop is No Limits. Or that's the one that I went to.
Yeah.
And I went to No Limits. They set me up with a bow, and it was actually embarrassing. Like, I mean, granted, I wouldn't say they were the nicest people, because I go in with this freaking, like, I'm just like, hey guys, I have no idea what I'm doing. I have absolutely no clue where we're going. I don't even know when we're going. All I know is I've been told to come here and get a bow that can kill an elk. That's all and they would ask me, hey, what's your, do you want this or what's this? And I'm like, I don't know. And like, I actually still remember what it was Braden. And now we're friends though, because he does CrossFit, and now we're buddies. But at the time, Braden was like, I just kept deferring to my buddy Gary. I was like, I don't know. It all depends on what Gary wants to do. I'll have to ask him. I don't know. And then at one point, Braden was just like, is Gary gonna let the arrow fly for you? Like, is he going to draw it back
is he gonna
for you?
pull it back for you?
And I'm just like, oh my, I was devastated, because that was what I was worried about. Cause I'm coming into this alpha male thing as, like a self-proclaimed like fit alpha guy myself, but I was just such a newbie. I had no idea.
You got to start somewhere.
Yeah, you got to start somewhere. And honestly, like, screw it. If people make fun, it doesn't matter. Like, you can be the tool that I probably was, where I'm like, hey guys, I have money. That should be good enough. Just set me up with what I need. What kind of site do you want? I don't know. What should I like? It was every single question. I was just like, I do not know. Please tell me the answer. I don't care how much it costs. Like, that was kind of my approach. Pretentious to them, maybe, but for me, it was like, hey, I don't know any better, so I trust the experts, and I'm ready and I'm willing to spend money for good gear, because the last thing I want to do is go buy shitty gear and then you have to buy a whole new set, right? Yeah. I'm the kind of person where when I'm into something, I get the best stuff. So I got set up. I got my bow. Luckily Braden had softened at that point, and we had talked and actually did a seminar at his CrossFit gym, and he was just like, he started just walking me through, hey, here's what you need to do today. Just dial in, here's how you adjust your sight. Dial in these arrows at 20 yards. And then we started working our way back, and I practiced, and then I got dialed in, and then just kept, scooting the targets back and so on and so forth. And then I felt pretty confident in my shot out to 70, 80 yards. And I think what was cool is that me just getting into the archery side of things, for the first time in a very, very long time, I was a complete student that had no idea what to do. And I normally am the coach. I'm the one teaching people how to do all the CrossFit moves. But it was so cool to be on the receiving end and to like prove that I could be a good student again and listen. Like when people talk about going through the shot process, it's like, oh, I'm actually going to listen and apply that. I'm not just going to roll my eyes and punch the trigger, So it was really cool being a student again. And what's cool is like, I mean, even the feedback I've got from like lots of hunting experts that I've shot with is like, dude, you're dialed. And it's just because awesome, I trusted the process, and I tried not to take any shortcuts. I was just like listening every step of the way and letting someone who knew a lot better than me teach me how to do it. So anyway, all that, I buy, an exorbitant amount of Sitka gear. Obviously, because it's the first camo. What's the best camo? Sitka. Okay, boom, done. It's just like, oh man, so much expenditure that month leading into hunting season. But I got all the stuff. I got all the gear. We got out there. We did a scouting trip the weekend before, and we like walked up to the spot. We put the binos on, and it was like first person to see elk gets a free breakfast. And I apparently have eagle eyes. Like Gary's like, how did you see that? I'm like, I don't know, dude. I don't know if it's from the fishing days, like sight fishing, but I can spot them, I guess. At least compared
some people just have that ability. My hunting buddy, he can't call to save his life, but he can look on a mountainside and immediately point out 5 animals. It's crazy. He's just got the eyes.
Heck yeah, man. So I'm there, we're glassing, and I was like, yeah, is that elk? I think that's elk, Gary. And he's like, son of a bitch, it is. And then that was it. And we were done. We set up camp, and then it's like, this is where we're coming back to. And I was like, really? It's that easy? I don't know, man. Like for fishing.
When were you scouting relative to your hunt?
This was like the weekend before. Okay. Like I think the hunt started on Wednesday. We were out there on Sunday.
Got it.
And yeah, we set up like where our basically permanent tent was going to be for the whole month. And I realized, lots of mistakes are already being made, like being so set on a single spot, not just, following the animals. Anyway,
made those mistakes myself.
Oh man. So we set, we get the tent set up, and I'm just like, oh man, that was cool. Like, yeah, they're there, but still I'm just like huge question marks. I'm like, I don't know, man. Like when I'm in fishing tournaments, like I have a plan A, B, C, D, E, F, like I am so thorough. And what I realized is that the hunting world has so many parallels to like competitive fishing, even though you wouldn't think it. There's just so many things about like patterning animals and about like adjustments based on the weather and like coming up with game plans and also using topo maps. I mean, I immediately was an expert at using the topo maps and reading them. Or my buddy was like, "Wait, how do you know how to do this?" And I'm like, it's a topo map, dude. That's all we do in fishing is read topo maps. So I was like super dialed in with that. And anyway, the season begins, and I think, we saw elk. Now, granted, I had a cow tag because this particular unit was like, we had a Class A tag for me for cow and a Class A tag for him for a bull. Like there wasn't like an either or.
Gotcha. So it's not over the counter. You actually drew.
No, this was a draw. This was a draw, but it was
Okay.
a 0 draw unit. And I won't mention it, but the unit sucks. So if I did mention it, no one would find anything. So we started getting into elk, man. I mean, I have no idea what we're doing. We're trampling around the woods, and he's calling because I don't know what the heck I had 2 hoochie mamas, and hindsight is 2020. I absolutely should have dialed in my calling, and that is one of the reasons we did not find success that September. And we end up staying out there for a solid, I think it was 10 days. I think we were 10 days in the woods. We had a couple, we'll call them refuelings down at the the local town, at the local burger shop when we were completely demoralized.
Been there.
Yep, had a couple refueling stations where we just get this giant bowl of ice cream and enormous burgers, and it was just fries, and just be depressed.
I'm not above admitting that I have texted a friend saying, "Would you deliver a pizza to me up in the woods?" Just trying to get something up there, just because we weren't having a great hunt. And I'm like, you know what? I don't want to drive an hour and a half round trip with my buddy. He might do it. And then, of course, that day my shoelaces exploded on the mountain. So I got out of the mountain with basically a boot and a half, just barely enough to tie it to keep it on. So I had to go to town. So we got pizza that day.
Dang. I was gonna say, did the buddy deliver the pizza?
No, he didn't. But I had to go to town at that point.
Because if you hadn't have gone to town and that buddy brought you a pizza, that's a ride or die right there.
He said buddy. He would have, but he happened to be out of town that day.
Oh man,
or at least he says that. I can't validate.
I love it. So, so we're 10 days out there, and I think on the 8th day, we realized nothing was making noise, nothing was calling. We were seeing sign everywhere. We were seeing elk. Granted, not that many bulls, right? But we were seeing elk, and honestly, we agreed that any cow within range, absolutely take it. Like there was no holding back. It was like a cow is a success for us for sure. I had a couple muleys get close to me, almost drew back on one, but like I just kept picking up all these incredible.
Well, you had a muley tag too, huh?
Yeah. I picked up a muley tag. And oh man, it was just like I was picking up all these like crazy encounters. Like specifically, the first like, oh my God, was on like day 4 or something like that. We're walking on just like the trail, and it's like a very heavily trafficked trail with freaking mountain bikes and hikers, and all right, terrible spot to be, but whatever. But we're walking down this trail to get to a spot that we're going to like walk, more into the woods. And then we hear some noises, and then Gary just puts up his hand, freezes, knocks an arrow, and draws. And sure enough, there's like 5 freaking elk that were just like right in the process of crossing the trail. There might have been like 8 or 10. And there's one that can't see him, and he draws back, and it steps right out in front of him on the trail at like 20 yards, and then just kind of looks at him, and it was a freaking spike.
Oh, like the only thing you can't
shoot.
The
only thing we can't shoot. And it was a freaking spike. And then Gary's just sitting there holding. The spike is just looking at him for like, it's probably only like 30 seconds, but it felt like forever. And then he just, eventually Gary just kind of like lets his draw back down because he doesn't know what to do. Like he's just going to have a stare down with this guy for an hour.
At full draw.
And then, of course, everybody just poof, and everybody spooks. Yeah. And, of course, every other one with him was a cow. and I'm sure there was a bull in there somewhere, and they just spooked. I was like, holy shit, dude! Like that was that close encounter was my first encounter with an actual animal that we could have killed. Right, that was like close and intimate. We had a draw situation. That's when it was just like, oh my God. And like my whole body was just like, I will hunt for the rest of my life. And we're talking like, and it's so funny because so many, like all these experienced hunters, like, oh yeah, it was a cow, or oh yeah, it was like it was a small 6x6, and I wasn't that big. But it's just like, guys, we can't forget that initial feeling of like, dude, I don't care if that was a freaking white-tailed doe that weighed 80 pounds or whatever. Like that feeling that I had right there is a feeling I will never forget. That like, holy shit, we were in it. And we almost were successful on a hunt. And yeah, it would have been a cow or whatever, but it doesn't matter because that was the most unbelievably exciting moment that I had in a really, really long time. Like comparable to, I've like, there's been a couple times where I've like literally like reeled in the winning fish at like the last hour of a tournament that won me $50,000. Like I've actually lived that before. Not many people have had that, and it was every bit, if not better than that. Like it was crazy, man. And then so that just like, dude, that lit my fire for the next, it was like 5 or 6 days. We didn't really get the calling thing. Like I still didn't understand the calling thing. I'm like, dude, this shit doesn't seem to work very well. Like we're calling, no noise coming back, and the only elk we were running into was when we just kind of sat and they walked by, or we'd like happen to cross their paths. So I just started being like, hey man, I think the best, like based on what I've seen, what little I know, our best chances if we just start posting up. Like if we sit where we know they are and they tend to be walking, I just have a good feeling about it. All right. So we did a couple sitting sessions like in the evenings, and I still remember this one, man. We're sitting there, on this trail. We have like it all mapped out of where they should come from. We're sitting there. Gary's reading, Jordan Peterson. He's got his book out, flipping through it. My bow's like laying on the right, and who knows what the heck I'm doing. And we're just sitting there. And then when we're kind of like mumbling to each other, like talking every once in a while, like trying to stay quiet. And then it was just like, there's an elk in front of us. 2 feet in front of us. It had literally walked on the trail that we are sitting on. And again, it's a spike. This spike is, I swear to you, I could have reached out my hand and touched it on the back. And it had no idea we were there. And
good wind.
And great wind, or just super dumb elk. And I thought, and I obviously didn't move, and I definitely heard something from behind me spook, and that was probably the cow, like the mom. Because I guess like the really infant spikes or baby, basically the baby's like, I guess there's a period where the cow is like alone with them. I don't know. Anyway, I heard something behind me spook, and I'm sure like something winded us. But this guy had no clue that we were there. But that was my first lesson on when you're sitting, you better have an arrow knocked, and you better be able to grab the bow and draw it with it like immediately, with very little noise. Like I had my bow like 4 feet to the right of me, like in some crazy world, assuming that like, oh, there's the elk. I guess I'll just reach all the way over here and grab my bow and then pull out an arrow. And it's just like, dude, I was so stupid. But that's how you just keep making mistakes, and that's how you get better, because there's no better way to learn.
Yep, okay. The best lessons are self-taught, and I'll tell you a quick story that's very similar.
Please.
It's actually my first elk season in Colorado. It's third season rifle, so it's mid-November, and I had hiked up this mountain with my buddy. We literally just walked the whole way up. We get to the top, and there's knee-deep snow. And I'm like, okay, it's time for lunch. We're just going to sit down. So we just find a nice rock to basically go sit behind. And I set my rifle down on the rock. And this rock's, let's say 8 feet, 8 feet in diameter. Mm-hmm. So I set my rifle down and I'm kind of walking around it looking for a good place to sit, and I find a spot. I sit down. Turns out on the exact opposite side of the rock as my rifle. I didn't even think to go and get it. So I sit down, break out my little bagel sandwich. My buddy sits down. His rifle's next to mine. We're eating our bagel sandwiches, basically glassing over this range.
Mm-hmm.
I hear something back into the right, and at about 60 yards, I see 3 bulls, like 4 cows, and a couple spikes. And I'm like,
God.
I'm like, this is it. And I'm like looking around. I'm like, where's my rifle? Holy shit, no. So I'm like, well, you know what? If I don't try and get my rifle, I have no chance. So I crawl, and not behind the rock. I crawl in front of the rock, and I go and I get my rifle, and I set up. And there's 60 yards, 60, 70 yards. Pull my rifle up, and at this point, the bulls had already boogered off down the next hillside, so I can't see them. But I still see all the cows. I still see all the spikes, and I'm like, well, I did a little bit of research, and I thought that the bulls would maybe be following. So I just sat there with my crosshairs on a spike. 5 minutes as it fed, but the bulls had already run off, and I only had a bull tag. So you're absolutely right. You got to have that weapon by your side, man. I did the exact same thing. But I actually saw the bulls and had the opportunity, but my rifle was just too far away.
Oh, horrible. But
have not made that mistake since, but also have not had quite the opportunity since.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I'll never have that. Yeah. And that's what's so interesting though, is like, you have to learn by experience in a lot of these things, right? Someone can say, hey, never leave it. Like common hunting wisdom is like, hey, like always have your weapon ready. Okay. Yeah. But like, especially now that I know, like flash forward, I've done bear hunts, I've done whitetail hunts, I've done axis deer hunts, I've done hog hunts, like all in the last 9 months. And all of that, like all of these things have culminated, like all the mistakes I've made. It's like, not only do I know to always have my weapon ready, but like if I'm sitting, an arrow is knocked and I have the bow positioned in a way where my left hand can grab the handle without making any noise. Right? Like, yeah, it's that like, and that's the thing, like someone telling you something and you actually learning it, the difference between always having your weapon ready in air quotes versus having it like arrow knocked, left hand accessible to the handle without making noise within 2 seconds, right? Totally different, right? There's a whole
totally different.
Yeah.
I agree 100%. In fact, since I left that rifle on the wrong side of that rock, I have not taken one crap in the woods without having a weapon next to me, because I know that the opportunity is going to arise at some point where I have my pants down, but I will have my weapon ready.
and Michael, when that kill happens and your pants are down and you shoot an animal, please let me interview you on your own podcast.
Yeah, we'll have to come back to that one. I mean, I keep trying. I keep taking craps in the wood, but the opportunity hasn't happened yet. Yeah, someday.
Jeez. Oh, man, I love it. Oh, yeah. Man. And I guess like to wrap up this particular story, I mean, there's so many little itty bitty things on this elk season, but it culminated in we started sitting more. And it was like with a couple nights to go, I was like, Gary, I think we should break up. Let's go to 2 different spots where we know that they're moving on like a daily basis, and let's sit. And sure enough, man,
multipliers.
Yeah, sure enough, about an hour into my sitting on a stump, and there's this game trail in front of me. The wind's good, and I'm like, you know what? I bet they come, on this game trail. Sure enough, I just hear, a little bit of rustling, and I look over, and there are 2 spikes walking exactly on the trail, and my heart just goes. I could like see them clear as day. They walk right in front of me at 18 yards. I watch them. They never see me. They walk right across my face and just keep going to the left. So many lanes of shooting opportunities. And I'm like, oh my God. And I have a lot more time. I'm like, dude, this is the spot. About 10 minutes later, I hear, meow, meow, and there comes a cow. Now, was it a full-grown cow? I have no idea, but it was a cow. And I know at hindsight, I'm like, man, maybe that was like a calf. I don't even know, because it was like trying to find the spikes. It was like, hey, why'd you leave me? Yeah. And I hear this cow, and it's just a solo cow, and she's walking exactly on the trail where I thought she'd be walking. Is walking. She kind of like pauses a little bit, like looks around before going into kind of like this clearing. And me not knowing how elk work and me not knowing, basically I completely froze because I was terrified that if I moved to draw, the elk would run away. Right now, in hindsight, I realize how much noise you can get away with elk. Whitetail deer, totally different freaking ball game, right? I've experienced the most spooky whitetail deer ever, where like me just inhaling with my nose causes them to perk up and say, "What was that?" Like where you like almost can't even breathe, like you're trying to tell your heart to shut up. But these elk, dude, I didn't realize that I could have been like, as soon as that sucker, walked behind the tree or walked out, I could have drawn, and all it would have done is looked at me for a perfect shot. But anyway, she comes to this tree. It's about 18 yards. She looks left, looks right, seemingly looks right through me, and then just keeps on moseying right along. And at that point, I absolutely should have drawn, or some sort of noise, froze her, and then it would have been a perfect broadside 18-yard shot. Perfect. But in my absolute terror and not knowing what to do, and like everything, like my brain, I was like blacking out. It was like, this is my shot. This is it. Oh my God, we've been here for 8 days and it's happening. This is it. I can shoot this. Oh my God, I can shoot this animal. So she goes behind the first set of trees. I draw, and I had already sighted in all of the shooting lanes, and I draw, and she walks, through the lane. She walks in between the trees at like 20, and my bow is like, oh my God, it's like left, right, up, down, left, right. I'm like, there's no way I'm releasing this. Like, what's going on right now? I can't even there's no way anything's aligned. So I took a deep breath, and then she kept walking. And then at 33 yards, there was another shooting lane, and she steps out, and I punch shit out of the trigger. And I thought I made an absolutely perfect shot. We've made a litany of mistakes at this point, but huge mistake. I never made a noise to stop her. So she was moving, right?
Oh, okay.
She was on the move. I mean, she wasn't running, but she was walking. But I literally
big strides. I
was such a newbie to hunting. I at that point did not know that you're supposed to make a noise to stop the animal, because I hadn't seen any hunting video. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't realize I was supposed to make a noise to make them stop and look. I assumed any noise that was made, they would run away. So I didn't make any noise. I released this arrow at 33, and obviously, because I'm freaking out, blacking out pretty much at this point, I have no idea. Like, I have no idea if I hit her, but based on my memory and based on what I saw, I thought I could see the fletching basically sticking out of the very, very middle of her body, and it was a perfect quartering away shot, where if the fletching is where I saw it, it should have been an absolutely perfect shot.
Yeah.
So I thought it was perfect. I was convinced. It was perfect. So I released the arrow, and as soon as I released it, I heard a kind of an interesting hollowish noise, almost like a hollow tree, like a hollow log being hit. And I was just like, I don't know what that was. I assumed at the time that it was her right leg stepping on a log as she kicked to run away. But I thought I saw the arrow in her. I don't know. I know I heard a noise, and I'm shaking. Everything's going crazy. Immediately, I pull out my phone, call Gary, and I'm like, dude, I did it. I did it. I smoked her. We did it. And then he's like, all right, come find me, and then we'll go find her. I'm like, all right, cool. So I put all my shit together and trounce through the woods to try to go find him. Minutes, we're talking 2 minutes after I had shot this elk. So I go find Gary, which is another enormous mistake. Why would I ever leave this? There's shooting lanes, right? For us to find the exact spot where that arrow hit, I should stay there and Absolutely. Let Gary come into me and say, nope, yep, that was it right there. Nope. We did everything wrong. I left I left the spot. I went and found him. We were making noise because I'm not being quiet. I'm just like trying to find Gary as quickly as possible. My mind's racing. Oh my God, like we're going to find it. Oh my God, now we have to pack it out. Like it's getting dark. Like it's just like everything's going crazy.
My headlamp's been on in my bag all day.
It's nuts. And then so like eventually I find him. He's like, yeah, man, like I thought I heard something like running off in that direction. I was like, oh, that was probably the two bulls that were in front of her, because she kind of turned off and went a different way, back to my left. And so we go back into the spot, and I'm like, yeah, like it should be right here. And then we like look around and we don't see a single sign of blood. I'm like, maybe it's right here. There's a different shooting lane. And then I was like, you know what, let me go sit on the log where I was shooting. So I went and sat, and then I like had him walk the trail. And basically I was like, it's either there or there. And we just we looked everywhere. No arrow, no blood, no nothing. Wow. So for me, I'm like, oh, she went that way. So I just started walking that way. And I was just like, she's got to be like 100 yards that way. So I just like walked in a straight line, like where I thought I saw her go. And I'm just like, I'm rushing and rushing and rushing, because my whole thought is like, I need to find this animal, because we need to find it and pack it out before it gets dark, before it gets too dark. And so I'm just like pushing it, and I'm just like walking around. And at some point later that night, when we had I had gone off, come back, and I'm like starting to kind of freak out. It's like, wait, like we haven't found a single sign of this animal, because there's tracks everywhere, right? There's I can't be like, oh, there's a track. It's like, no, there's tracks everywhere. So we need blood, or we need an arrow, we need a body, right? And I'm just trouncing through the woods. I'm also colorblind. So red.
Oh no.
So that's why I was like, dude, I'm not going to be helping you very much by looking for blood, because red on green, that's tough for me, man. So I just went looking for the animal. And about I'm starting to text my buddies, and I called my buddy, and I'm like, guys, what do we do? I can't find anything. What happened? And I kept rewalking everybody through the shot and the shot placement and the noise I heard, and oh yeah, the noise you heard was definitely that's the lung, or the noise you heard was this. And just everyone's like, oh, you'll be fine. You're good. Just find the arrow. So I'm like, all right, I'll go find the arrow. Nothing. Can't find anything. Search everywhere. And I'm just I'm starting to lose my mind, man.
Yeah.
And ultimately, we ended up searching for, and that was a very long day of hunting, by the way. We had pushed it really hard that morning. So Gary's delirious at this point. He hadn't had water. He never told me this, but he hadn't had water in 5 hours. So he's freaking delirious. I'm going nuts, because I'm like, did I just shoot an animal that I'm never going to find? I'll quit. I'm going to quit hunting on the spot. I'm done. If I shot an animal that I'm not going to be able to find, this is my absolute worst nightmare. Worst nightmare could possibly imagine. And we eventually just kind of give up that night, because we had searched for 5-6 hours. And ultimately, what I realized is at some point that night, I was kind of I was 200, 300 yards away, and I heard something run off in the woods. And it never crossed my mind that that was probably her, right?
Yeah.
It was probably because we had made so much noise, we probably spooked everything at that point. And she was probably, we never found a single drop of blood, never heard her. Maybe we did then. We didn't find a single sign of her. Complete ghost, no arrow, and it absolutely tore me to pieces.
I'm sure.
And then we went back the next morning, calculated the temperatures, and we searched for another 5 hours. So we spent it was anywhere between 8 and 10 hours looking for that animal. Never found a single sign of her. I was devastated, dude. I was I hated myself. I was like, why did I do that? Why did I rush the shot? Why didn't I, what did I do wrong? And then Gary's like, oh, did you make a noise to stop it? And I was like, no one told me to do that. God damn it. Why didn't anyone tell me to do that? Right. Dude, it was horrible. And then as I'm telling my friends, people are like, hey man, it happens. That's the nature of archery hunting, especially. And like you're going to make mistakes, and it happens. And, you know, it might be bear food, and it might be, and like, now that I know what I know, and also I was using, there was like, there was a miscommunication when I was buying my broadheads. So like Braden suggested the Micro Hades, whatever the heck brand that Dan Staten recommends as well. And when I didn't have time, so I was busy. So Gary bought them for me, but he bought the hybrid versions for me because he thought that was the same as the non-hybrid version, the fixed blade. So I had hybrids, and now I realize what probably happened was I probably caught that front shoulder blade on the step, you know, like her leg was probably still behind her and she was stepping forward with the right, and I shot her on the left side.
Blocking the vitals. Yeah.
And the shoulder blade was probably blocking the vitals. And that pop I heard was probably my expandable hitting her freaking scapula and her being completely freaking fine and running away.
Yeah.
That's like, based on what I know now, like that's one of the only explanations I can think of. So anyway, that was an like, I have never experienced so much emotion in such a short period of time, where I went from the highest of highs, pure elation, to the lowest of lows. Like, I was tearing up. I was like, what's the point of this? Like, how can I do that? Like, I feel horrible. And all that culminates in an unsuccessful elk season, but an absolute respect for nature, for hunting, and then also for realizing that, like, for me to be a hunter, I am absolutely not like the rack 'em and stack 'em. Yeah, let's just like let the arrows fly. For me, man, I am all about, like, if I can't take a perfect shot, I'm not freaking taking the shot. And that's why the last like 6 animals I've harvested have all been perfect heart shots. And it's like, I just, yeah, it's just like this dedication where, like, I'm really glad I got the mistake out of the way, because had I shot that elk perfectly, so I thought, then I would have thought that I knew what I needed to do to shoot the next one, right? And it might have wounded a really big bull, or it might have, you know, whatever. It might have been an even worse scenario. But what happened, and I learned so much from that, making that mistake on that first cow, where now so many animals on the back end have been harvested very cleanly. Like, the last hunt I was on was a bear hunt in Canada, and it was a perfect heart shot. And it's like, the reason I'm still hunting is, one, I'm still all about harvesting my own meat. Now, you know, pretty much the only meat I've been eating lately is stuff that I've harvested. And two, I just like, I realized that, to me, hunting ethically and hunting the right way and hunting with confidence in myself is, I'm not doing it for anyone else. I'm not pulling the trigger because I'm thinking about how big the horns are, or I'm not pulling the trigger, you know, or releasing the arrow because of the story I want to tell other people. It's like, it's for me. And I know that for me, the only way I'm going to feel happy about the shot is if it's a super controlled, ethical shot. And like, that's where I live now, man. And it's been so good, because all of the recent hunts that I've been on, I've just been like so patient. And the shot tends to present itself a lot later than you ever imagined it. And yeah, it's been really powerful. So thanks to that original event, it has definitely impacted me as a hunter. And now I'm really excited to continue on it, and hopefully, you know, get a pronghorn this year, which I know are absolutely nearly impossible with a bow, and then also, you know, the grand finale of trying to live a full 30 days in the woods for elk season in September. I'm all about it. And it all came from Gary just being the guy that, you know, I know, I love him, I trust him. And I was just like, all right, man, if you think this is going to be good for me, I trust you. And now he's created a monster that hunts way too much, to the detriment of his of his life.
Yeah. You know, what's funny, Ben, is I've asked a lot of people to be on this podcast and tell them whatever stories are the most entertaining, whatever stories mean the most to you. And the ones that keep coming up over and over again are the first harvest, which makes a ton of sense, right?
Yeah.
But then also, almost everyone is telling a story about the one that got away, that made them feel the way that they felt after thinking that they maybe just hurt an animal and aren't going to actually get to harvest it. I think podcast number 1, podcast number 2, like these stories come up. It's inevitable. Specifically with archery, it's going to happen. You're going to lose an animal at some point or another. But it means that you're doing it right. I think when it tears you up that much, and for all the other folks that have told these stories, the fact that they, you and I don't have a ton of experience. Some of these guys have hunted for 20 years. And it's still the ones that mean the most to them are the ones that they hurt the animal, and they can't take that back. So it means you're hunting the right way, man. So it's a good story.
Yeah, man.
But yeah, man. So Ben, why don't you tell all the folks? I know you did a little bit at the beginning, but why don't you tell them where they can find you? I'll make sure to put show notes and links to everything in the show notes.
Yeah, so if anyone wants to get in touch with me, talk hunting, give me your best hunting spots, all the above, or of course, get some fitness advice. I would love to help you out. Just the best way is probably Instagram. It's just WODPREP on Instagram, WODPREP. I still check it. I still check the DMs. And then you can also email me, ben@wodprep.com. That's a bit of a mess sometimes, but my assistant can, if you just mention that you heard me on a hunting podcast or the Hunting Stories podcast, then that'd be a great way. She'll flag that for me to actually read it. And yeah, if you want to check out my website, it's just wodprep.com, WODPREP. And I can definitely help anyone who's trying to get better at functional fitness, get better at it. And then I also have a pretty big YouTube channel as well that has a lot of really good free tips. Just like the website, lots of free tips there, but that's just youtube.com/WODPREP. Pretty simple stuff.
Awesome, Ben. Well, thank you so much, man. It's really nice to hear, the story of the moment that you fell in love with hunting, and also the moment that you almost quit. So it was fun today, man. Thank you.
It gave me chills just reliving it, and man, it makes me excited to. I think we're like 70 days out, or I think actually for me it might only be 65 days at this point out from when we get to start chasing animals around. So I am super excited.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you again. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, man.
All right, guys, that's it. Another story in the books. If you have any feedback, please let us know. Just go to @huntingstories_official on Instagram and DM us, or you can go to our website. And don't forget to follow us while you're there. Now, I want to thank Ben again for sharing his story and encouraging any of you looking to become more fit to follow Ben and WODPREP on his website, his Instagram. I have actually put links to everything in the show notes. Most of his content is free, and it's helped me a ton, so I'm sure it can help plenty of you out there as well. And now, of course, don't forget to subscribe, review, comment on your preferred podcast app, Spotify, Apple, whatever it is that you're using. And, of course, tell people about us. Share our hunting stories with more people. Share it with your mom, your dad, your brother, your sister, whoever it is, your hunting buddies. Let's get these stories out there. So thanks again. I really do appreciate you all tuning in. Now go make some stories of your own.